Hey there, micro folks. This is Mr. Hooker, and today we are looking at Chapter 4, Consumer and Producer Surplus. So, you know what this is. You probably don't know. You didn't know it was called Consumer and Producer Surplus. But on the consumer side, it is basically just getting a deal. So, let's get into it. Let's look at it. So this is all about measuring market efficiency. Um, so measure the analysis of consumer and producer surplus really just helps us calculate how much benefit producers and consumers receive from participating in a market and how the welfare of consumers and producers is affected by changes in prices. So let's look at what this looks like. We're going to start with the consumer side. That's us, right? So consumers' willingness to pay for a good is the maximum price at which they would buy a good. So let's say that basically you want to buy a shirt and you're willing to pay $30 for that shirt, right? And you go out looking for this shirt and you look high and low, you keep looking around, and then you finally find this shirt for $20 somewhere, right? Um, so you find it for $20. So the price is 20, your willingness to pay is 30. Your consumer surplus is the 30 willingness to pay minus the price of 20, $10. So that is how we find consumer surplus. Your willingness to pay minus the price, and that is way we go with it. So um, your individual consumer surplus is the gain to the buyer from the purchase of the good. It's the difference between the price paid and the willingness to pay. So total consumer surplus is the sum of the individual consumer surpluses of all the buyers in the market. Um, so we often use the term consumer surplus to refer to both individual and total consumer surplus. So don't get that all twisted. It's both. Uh, it is what it is. So if we had used sneakers, um, and we had Aisha, Ben, Chloe, Darsh, and Alina in the market. Aisha was willing to pay 59, Ben was willing to pay 45, Chloe was willing to pay 35, Darsh was willing to pay 25, and Elena was willing to pay 10. Some of these won't actually be in the market. Darsh and Elena are out because the actual price is 30. So their willingness to pay price is actually below the market price. But Aisha, Ben, and Chloe are in the market. Aisha gets a consumer surplus of 59 minus the 30 or 29. Ben is 45 minus the 30 or 15. And Chloe is 35 minus the 30 or 5. So then you would sum up the 29, the 15, and the 5, and that would give you the total consumer surplus. Now, with a downward sloping demand curve, the consumer surplus looks like this. And then you could find this geometrically. If you wanted to do that, that would just be the area of a triangle. If you remember that from geometry class, if you don't, I'm here to help you. That is 1/2 base times height. So they don't have a intercept up there for the y, but you would basically go whatever the intercept is for the demand curve at the top minus the 500, 0 to 1 million times 1/2 or 0.5. And so that is the whole thing right there. That's how you would find it on a geometrical piece. And note, like when you do this um, in the problems, there's a whole issue with that because of the way that that is done. So, um, like there's an issue. You cannot do that geometrically. So you have to do it just like this with the steps. Um, they want you to do the step piece, not the geometrics. Um, and I've had words with them about that. the geometric way and the step way are different. All right. So let's say that the price falls, and now the price is $20. Well, Darsh is now in the market. Aisha, Ben, and Chloe now get increased consumer surpluses. Their in surpluses are all going to increase by 10. And then Darsh is going to get a consumer surplus of 5. So that is the way that works. So the gain in consumer surplus has two parts. There's a gain for those who would have bought it at 30. I just mentioned each one of those gained 10 in consumer surplus. And then the other piece is the new entrant, which is Darsh. He is going to buy, or they are going to buy more, are going to enter the market, and they're going to buy some now too. So they have a consumer surplus of 5 that they weren't in the market before. And so here is that whole thing geometrically. So if you lower the price and bang, increase in consumer surplus, the original buyers is there to the left, the new buyers is there to the right. So that's the way that looks out. All right, no partners. All right, now supply curve. So here, if we're supplying, this is producer surplus. And this is the difference between the minimum cost you're willing to sell this at and the price. And the minimum cost you're willing to sell it at, we assume that that is marginal cost. So that is the way we are looking at that. So we assume that that is your marginal cost. So Andrew, Brianna, Carlos, Desiree, and Eli have marginal costs of 5, 15, 25, 35, and 45. And we will assume a price again of 30, which means that Andrew, Brianna, and Carlos are in the market. Desiree and Eli is just too expensive, or the market price. Their costs are too high. Market price is too low. So that's just not going to work for them. Producer surplus is the difference between the market price and the price at which firms are willing to supply. Your individual is the net gain to the individual seller from selling the good. It's equal to the difference between the price received and the seller's cost. The seller's cost includes monetary cost, but may also include opportunity cost. We just always assume marginal cost. This is the only one I've ever seen that does it that way. But total producer surplus is the sum of the individual producer surpluses of all sellers in the market. And once again, we use producer surplus to refer to both individual and total producer surplus. So if it's 30, Andrew had a cost of 5. He received 30, so he has an individual producer surplus of 25. Betty was at 15, so she gets a producer surplus of 15. Carlos is 25, so they get a producer surplus of 5. So your total producer surplus is 45. And Donna and Engelbert, I don't remember Engelbert. It was Eli. It wasn't Engelbert. All right. So it wasn't even Donna. It was Desiree. All right. So yeah, they like to change names on people here. So then this is the way that works. Andrew's producer surplus is not 5. It is 5 from 5 to 30. It's 25. So yeah, they got that math wrong. And then Brianna is from 15 to 30, it's 15. And then Carlos, they got right. That one's 5. All right. So once again, you can find this geometrically. It's the area of that triangle 5 to whatever the intercept is for the supply curve, over to 1,000,000, and 0 to 1,000,000, and times 1/2 or 0.5. And that would give you that. Now, it rises if the price increases. It would decrease if the price falls. But if the price goes from 5 to 7, you get increase in surplus to the original sellers. and gain to the new seller. So then we have what we call total surplus, and that's the sum of the producer and the consumer surplus. So consumer surplus on the top in blue, producer surplus on the bottom in red. And so if you add those two together, what you get is total surplus. This is the benefit to all participants in the market. So everybody that is able to participate in the market gets a benefit, and that is the total surplus of the market. So markets are usually efficient. Um, there's no way to make some people better off without making other people worse off. So they're usually efficient because they maximize total surplus. So there's three ways you might unsuccessfully try to increase total surplus, and that's reallocate consumption among the consumers, reallocate sales among the sellers, or change the quantity traded. So let's look at how that might mess thing up. Uh, so why reallocating consumption lowers consumer surplus? So everybody who buys a pair of sneakers at the market equilibrium has a willingness to pay of $30 or more. Everyone who doesn't buy a pair of sneakers has a willingness to pay of less than 30. So if we mess with that a little bit and we say, okay, if we move this down, uh, if we give it to somebody who had a willingness to pay of 25, then they're actually paying more than they were willing to pay. Um, that's not really a good thing. Reallocating sales lowers producer surplus. Anyone who sells a pair of sneakers at the market equilibrium has a lower cost than anyone who keeps a pair of sneakers. Um, so if we reallocate sales from someone who had a cost of 25 to someone who had a cost of 35 when the price is 30, then basically that person who had the cost of 35 is now losing $5 on the sale. This is not a win. That is a loss for that person, that seller. And why changing the quantity lowers this? If you move from E to AX or YB, you have dead weight loss. So AX, you're going to have this triangle AEX, and that is dead weight loss. That's a dead weight loss triangle. And if you go to YB, you have that triangle EYB. That is also a dead weight loss triangle. So either way, you have a dead weight loss triangle. You're not going to be in a good position. So markets are efficient. Competitive markets are usually efficient. It may take them time to get there, so they may not be efficient that day, but they will be efficient. They allocate consumption of the goods to the potential buyers who most value it, and they allocate sales to the potential sellers who most value the right to sell the good or who have the lowest cost. And they ensure that all transactions are mutually beneficial. So everybody who makes a purchase values the good more than every seller who makes the sale, and they ensure that no mutually beneficial transactions are missed. So every potential buyer who doesn't make a purchase values the good less than every potential seller who doesn't make a sale. So three basic caveats to efficiency. Although a market may be efficient, it isn't necessarily fair. We value efficiency more than fairness most times. And markets sometimes fail to deliver efficiency, and this is called market failure. And even when the market equilibrium maximizes total surplus, this doesn't mean it results in the best outcome for every individual consumer or producer. So that's when the government gets involved, and then you might experience government failure, but that's a thing. So we're going to stop there and we will pick up on the next slide in the next video.